Well, at this time I'm going to invite Alice up to join me up here on the stage. But as she's coming up, I want to give maybe just a little bit of context. So we got introduced to Open Hand Children's Home through a gentleman named Leroy Cole. Well, Leroy was a longtime friend of the Lasset family, and Leroy had been good friends with David's father, David Lassett's father, Blake Lassett, who spent much time in Kenya 20 years ago, went there to start doing ministry and planting churches and helping start orphanages. And Frank went there as well with his grandfather at the beginning. Frank, how long did you spend there? 6 months? 6 months. And so really we've known about this ministry, and we've gotten to know more about this ministry. And then when Alice was coming into town, we definitely wanted to connect with her. We have already been communicating a lot through Leroy, but then through WhatsApp, and then we had a great meeting last night. Well, what's so cool about this ministry in particular is, it's something we're already well acquainted with from a familial standpoint. You know, we have a family here that's been connected with you, and now as a broader church family, we're having an opportunity to get involved. So you can go ahead and take a seat. So everyone knows. In November, Karen and myself and Frank, who's been to Kenya, we're going to Kenya, and we're going to get the full picture of the ministry, because the ministry is really twofold at this moment. It's a orphanage that I found out last night, in 20 years of existence, has saved, rescued 125 children. Wow. You know, and so she's got some incredible stories of how these children have been rescued, and so there's the orphanage, but there's also a pastor's ministry, a ministry that's training up leaders to go into all of Kenya and all the world. And so, just kind of where I get going, and I start thinking that, it's like, okay, well, if we help establish more of the pastor's ministry and they get sent out and more orphanages get started through the pastors, and that's just kind of so. But we wanted you all this morning to get acquainted with Alice, with the ministry, because we really are looking to make a partnership here. So Alice, would you just share with us how this all got started?
Thank you very much. Is your mic on?
Is your mic on? What was that?
Good morning, church. Thank you, Steve, for the message. And it's challenging to me that how far have I gone for Jesus? It's really very challenging. My name is Alice Wanjiru. I know Steve can identify with those names. Mokoi. I was 65 on the 30th of June this year. I was married to David Mokoi, who rested on the 2nd of May this year. I have 4 children, 3 girls and 1 son.
3 girls and a boy as well.
I have 4 grandchildren. I have 1 married daughter, my third born. My second one is, I can't tell much. I've not had much of a testimony. I raised them in the church, and we married when we were not believers. But along the way, the Lord challenged me in very many areas, and some 27 years ago, the Lord saved me, and I guess I became a disciple of Jesus, and I was very fiery that time, right? And so I used to have a job, and I created, or rather the Lord led me to create a fellowship lunchtime on the Mondays in my office. And I managed to pull along about 7 ladies. 3 of them were much older than me. But I look to them like older sisters, because one of them is the one who shared Christ to me, and through her I was able to know more about Jesus. I was brought up, I would say, a nominal Christian home, because it's only my mother who was a Christian in the Anglican church. So I was basically raised in the church. So, but when I became an adult and I got to Nairobi, a big city, I just got happy, and I was lost in the worldly things. But I thank God that those days the Anglican church was very stable biblically. So in the Sunday school we learned a lot. And on this day when I became a believer, I remember Jessie, my now colleague in Open Hand, had gotten to know the Lord much, much earlier. She was much older than me, and she was going to college, and she was doing biblical counseling. So lunchtime she used to pass through my office and share the gospel, and she was so fiery. And I remember one day she asked me, Alice, do you ever go to the city? And I said yes. And when I was young, I used to be very classy, and admiring all the fashions in the world. And so she knew that, and I said, oh yeah. And then she asked me, have you been to this city, Wabera Street in Nairobi? And I said yes. And she asked, how I tell her, I guess a lot of those shops. And then she said, you know what? That's the way you can look at Jesus. You know, the way you admire and you desire to have those nice clothes, why don't you start desiring Jesus? And I didn't know how, I kept telling her, I can't feel, and she had come from a very deep Roman Catholic church. So I started searching, and I started praying, and I started wanting to desire, and true to the point, one morning, I woke up and I was just feeling that desire. And by lunchtime, I called her, I told her, what do I say? I feel like I have this desire. And she told me to go to a quiet place and pray and ask Jesus to save me. And I remember that day my husband was traveling. We used to go to Dubai and buy things and come to Kenya and sell. So we were buying tickets for him, changing money for him. And we went for lunch. I couldn't eat. I was just feeling restless. So we went back to the office, and I just pulled my chair and I lay down on the carpet and I cried, and I told Jesus, I can't feel anything, but I really want you to save me. And what came in my mind is a chorus that we used to sing in the church, based on Romans 8, 1 and 2. That there is now no condemnation to those. And I sang it. I didn't know I was disturbing the other neighbors. And I know a neighbor of mine, a lady also who was a Christian. I didn't know at that point she was praying for me. So she came in and she found me lying on the floor. And she tried, I didn't feel her tapping me. And when it was all over, she went back to her office, and I ran to her because I knew she was a Christian. But I used to tease her when she tells me she prays for me. So I tell her, oh, you know me, I'm like Hindu. I can resurrect in South Africa. But I knew all this was just a gimmick. So I ran to her and I told her I have felt something very different. The Lord has found me. So I cried on her shoulders. And from that day, we started a long journey of friendship. She was also much older. And believe you me, after that, I started searching churches. And I used to live a Golden church just next to my home. And I would travel miles to go to an Anglican church. And anyway, to cut a long story short, that is my beginning life with Jesus. And that's how I was able to pull her and pull Jassy and get other ladies to come to my office, and every Monday we used to meet and share the gospel. I started getting a very deep zeal of learning the Word of God. And in a year's time, I joined the PSF. I don't know where I didn't know. It started here, so I joined the PSF. I got very deep in learning every Wednesday morning. I had my 4 children. I got them now to start teaching them, especially when I remembered that what the Lord brought into my mind that day that I was saved is His Word, that there is now no condemnation. Yeah, so that's how the fellowship started, and so we gathered together. We had 3 older ladies, about 10 years older than us. We had 4 others who were younger, and among the 7, I was the youngest. And so I was very fiery. I used to go to Kibera. Steve is aware of Kibera. It is a slum area. We would go for evangelism and all that. So we started praying for our families, and towards the end of Moyera, Steve is aware. I haven't shared much. I just met Steve this morning and his wife, so we just shared. So I'm mentioning him because he knows the country, and he's aware that during Moy's era there was a lot of injustices. There is that time when HIV and AIDS pandemic was very high, so there was a lot of abandonment of children in deplorable places, like in pediatrics, in garbage sites, in hospitals. So one morning on a Monday, Jesse would leave the college and pass through my office, and the other ladies would come. So we used to have a fellowship between 1 and 2. And on that day, there was all these headlines that there was a child who had been rescued by a dog in a forest in Nairobi. And it caught our eyes, and we prayed, and on that day we put one of the prayer items for the nations to pray for the abandoned, and there were many children in the streets that time. So we started praying, and we started thinking of just having like 2 in our house, and the others. Of course, we knew our husbands, and none of us, the 7 of us, none of our husbands was a believer. So we knew that was a big handle. So all we could do now is to look for places that we can go to visit. So in 3 months of prayer, we started visiting children homes. And there is one that had been started by some people a while back, like 10 years before, called Mama Gina Children's Home. It had been named after the late president, the first president's wife, but they just named it. She had never been there. She had no idea that there was a home like that was there. And so we would visit there, just talk to the children, share the gospel. We hadn't any idea of even giving donations. We had just this zeal to go and share the word of God, and so we would move from there. From there, one time Jesse's daughter was volunteering at a children's home that had just been started by a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Beckman, called New Life Home, and they were rescuing abandoned babies who were HIV. So, and the daughter called us and said, "Oh, you better come to New Life. There are these babies, and some of them are just dying." That time there was no ARVs for children. So we started going there, and we would see these little children and hear horrible stories and where they have been abandoned. Some in hospitals, some would just be left in we have many slums in Nairobi. So some would be, the mother would just give birth, either die, or maybe just leave the baby in the teen houses. And so that's where our passion of rescuing abandoned babies with me and Jesse came from. So we went and shared on the following Monday, and that's the Monday when there was this big news that there was a baby that was rescued by a dog. And then me and Jesse, we said, why can't we have a small home for just what we can be able to afford? And then the other older ladies, they said, no, we've been talking of having an old home house where we can get these old folks who have been neglected by their families, and we can share the gospel as the exit from the world. And so we got divided, and the other lady said, well, they are not interested in rescuing, handling babies, they are old enough. So we kind of got a positive conflict, because they ended up now even saying, no, if you want to start it, you can start, but we'll back you up. So the biggest handle now was to go and convince our husbands that we wanted to do it, and so we prayed about it, and one night Jesse just called me and said, Alice, it is tonight, we have to tell them now. This dream must come to reality. I was scared, so I told her, I was talking from the bedroom, and she was in the bedroom. She told me I'm also in the bedroom. Then we said, okay. Immediately I put the phone down, we rushed to the sitting room, and tell your husband, I tell mine. So I remember I told her, because later we talked, and I told her, no, I found mine watching TV, and you don't interact when he's watching the news. So I went there, I sat where he was sitting, and I waited, and when the news were over, I said, please put on the TV, there's something I want to share with you. He knew I had a lot of love for children, and at that time we would come from church, and we would go, there's a place in Nairobi where there was fair prices for, I don't know what you call them, chips? French fries. Yeah, so we would go there, buy a lot of French fries, and go giving the street children, because we used to have very, very many. So he already knew we were doing that, and so I told him what has been on my mind. And so he said, I don't think I can have such a burden. My children were already now in the stage where we require a lot of finances, so he told me, you can go ahead and do it, but don't involve me, don't let me get to know what you're doing, don't bring trouble and problems in the house. So I listened to all this, and I promised, I knew he loved children also, so I listened to it, and I promised that I'll go do it on my own. And Jessie the same, Jessie her last born is the age of my daughter, so all her children were out of the house, so the husband had joined golf, and he just told her, you know what, that's a good idea, because I know you'll not be nagging me while I'm coming late. So we both had different responses, and that's how it started. And thankfully, my husband had a cousin who had an old house. That's where Frank and the dad came. So we started from there, and it's interesting when you seek the Lord's work. He provides in such a mysterious way, because 3 months, we started now praying for God to give us a place. Actually, we asked God to give us a place where we can pay rent. And there was my husband's cousin who had a house which was kind of very, very deplorable, and tenants would come and leave. And now he had also become a Christian, and he was looking for ways of making the house like a place where he can cook for street children. And so he asked my husband whether he can help him renovate the house. And he said, oh, I don't like those things. Why don't you talk to my wife, and maybe she'll be interested to partner with you. And so when I called him, he told me, I just want to do something for the street children in Nairobi. And if you can use the house, it needs some renovations. And so that's how we got the house. And Nope, it was in such a bad state. We found a couple there that had a child who had special needs. She had to stay in a hot place. So we actually renovated the house ourselves. I had a brother, a younger, much younger brother, so he's the one who did the pipes and did the wires. When Frank and the dad came, they found a better place than how we picked it up. We painted ourselves, and then we started going around asking our friends for baby coats and things like that, and we furnished. And so the next thing was to go to get the government and look for the license. That was another major hurdle because the president at that time was not allowing any children homes to be established because he used to say that the missionaries go there, they do pictures and they come. They go to expose them, and so the country has been having a bad name. So no children homes were being registered. We only had that one of Mama Gina and the one for Mr. and Mrs. Beckman. And the one for Mrs. Beckman was like a church-based. So that was the greatest hurdle that we faced because one of the things that you had to prove is how when you put the children there, what are you going to give them? And of course, you had to write, they had to investigate, but we did go now to the area district children officer. We presented our papers, and of course, those questions we couldn't answer. We didn't have money. The money that we had was more from our husbands, and we also had our own families. So he declined to approve, and I had a classmate, a high school classmate that was much senior. So I met her. She knew me a lot, so I asked her whether she can help. And we told her what we intended to do, and she knew because she was in a ministry where they were handling all these cases of abandoned children and street children. So she said, Alice, I'm going to help you. And believe you me, if this is what you want to do, we are going to help. So she did a letter, a recommendation now to now his junior. And we took the letter there, and he handed it as what we call the Area Advisory Council. And they are men, they're just hungry men. And when I say that, Steve, you identify with me. They all want to be bribed, and so we had said we are not going to bribe anybody for the work of the Lord. And we used to pray, every Monday we used to pray that the Lord will just miraculously have our home registered. So instead of us facing the panel, he sarcastically told the Area Advisory Council to come and inspect the home. And they didn't expect to find, the house was in a kind of semi-slum area, and so they didn't expect anything good, but we had done a wonderful job. And when they came, they called him from the home and they said, oh, the home is very, very nice, and this one we can't say no. And then he asked them, have you checked the store? And they said, no. And so they asked us, where is the store where you have stocked the food? So my colleague is much older than me, so she's bold, and she said, why? We don't have to put anything in the store. So we took them to the room where was going to be our store, and there was nothing. There were no even shelves. So they called him and they said, oh, the store has nothing. So, no. Then, just come so that we can officially tell them that we can't register the home. So we went back, we sat in the boardroom and they were all there looking at us. And so the advisory officer asked, now that you can't prove how you're going to feed the children, we can't register this home. And so my colleague, Jesse, just stood up and told them, you know what, you have children. Your store is never full with food. You buy food when it's necessary. And they asked us all about education. They said, when that time comes, you'll be able to to know, and they said, what is your strongest supporter? He said, we have a women group and they are ready to support, and we had put it in the application. And that time I would just break down because I knew this man is just thinking about food for the stomach. And I knew the children that we had seen in those children homes, the most that they needed is really love and attention and care. So I was just crying, and then he asked me, why are you crying? And I told him, it's because I don't think these children have been abandoned because of just stomach food. It's deeper than that. So, I told him about love. I told him about giving the children attention, and he looked at me and he just looked at the panel around, and he asked us to walk out, and they called us after they had made a decision, and then he called us, and that was it. And we got our letter, and so now, thank you. Now was time now to go get the children, and by this time, the government had established like a temporary shelter in Nairobi called Nairobi Children's Home, where the police would come. It was a big room like this church where there were hundreds of cots, and you could find it with only 2 caregivers. So we used to go there. As we were doing this process, we used to go there and help lunchtime feeding the children. And there used to be just many abandoned babies of 1 hour, 2 hour, 2 days. And that particular day when our license was approved, we went there, and there was a boy that we had seen the previous day. The Minister of State that time was called Kajwan. We had named him Kajwan. It was very healthy and nice, and he was okay. It's sad because what they used to do, the caregivers are overwhelmed, so they would mix up the milk and go putting the milk in the mouth of the babies and leave the children with the milk and just go around picking up. And these are babies. You can imagine you put a bottle of milk on the baby in the mouths of the baby, and you don't hold. So some of them would struggle, some of them would choke. So it used to be a sad hour for us. So this day we went, and we thought that our first abandoned baby would be Kajwan. And we had named him Kajwan in a cynical way because he was a Minister of State, and there were so many petitions that had been made of the street children, the abandonment. But he was not doing anything, he was just a fat man. So when we went there, the first place we went is Kajwan's court, and he wasn't, there was another baby. And so we asked the caregiver, where did you take Kajwan? And he said, Kajwan died this morning. And it was it was the worst moment of our day. And we were very excited to have the certificate, and now to be, he was very healthy to die. And so we asked her, we went to the admin office, and we asked the lady there where they are buried, and they said they are all buried. So every morning they go collecting in the pots, the ones who have died, and they bury them in one grave. And we went back to the office very devastated, and we really thanked God that the license had been approved. And so we decided we'd just say we were only going to pick 7 who we would be able to afford, together with the other ladies. So we shared. That time, the group now, we were very busy with just running up and down. So sometimes we would be late for the fellowship and find the other ladies have done and gone. And kind of they had started being a bit resentful because we were so involved, and it's like we were not catching up with the vision. So we called them up and we told them we had the certificate, and the following day, because the house is ready, we are going to pick up a few children from the home because that is the only way we could be able to rescue babies. So The following day, I remember it was on a Thursday, we went there and we got our, actually instead of getting 7, it's like the government was telling us, take more. So we rescued, we found a lady who had rescued a girl in a dump site, in a polythene paper like trash, that had given back, put the baby in the polythene paper and dumped the trash in a garbage site called that garbage site. It's one of the biggest dump sites in Nairobi. And interesting enough, street boys go to the dump site to look for food. So this boy had seen this child. She didn't die. And so she took the child to the mother. The mother took the child to the police. And the police brought the child now to the children center, the government children center. And so when we are there filling the forms for the children that we are going to rescue, this baby comes and the mother is holding, and the mother put the baby on the table. So we went to check with Jesse and we found that this beautiful bundle of a girl, she was over 30 and it was just moving. She was about 3 hours old. So we held her and we didn't release her and we gave her the name Hope. She's our first abandoned baby girl. And Frank has a photo. Frank used to come and dip himself in those cords and sleep with about 2 babies on their chest. So Hope is our first abandoned girl. She was 20 in May 13. So we got other bigger children. So we ended up going home with 11 children and we were overwhelmed. And when we renovated the house, there was a couple that was living there, a man and wife, a Christian couple. So we asked them whether they could stay with us. And over time, as we were painting and renovating the house, they were still living there. So we gave them accommodation there. And well, that's how we started. And from there, we started telling our friends. It was easy the first 2 months because everybody was excited. But on the 3rd day, on the 3rd month, they were all like winning off. The excitement was winning off. And we were found with just like now our husbands told us not to burden them with our problems. So what do we do? The only thing that was, I went shared with my pastor that time in our church, and he told me they have very many needs, but he gave me a book. David was reminding me this about a man called George Mueller. He cared for orphans during the First World War. And he told me, Alice, you know how the church is burdened. We don't think we can come in as a church right now, but we pray for you. So he went in the library and gave me this book. And the whole of that night I read that book. And I read it and read it. And I went and shared with Jesse. And I told her, Jesse, you know what? This is the test that the Lord is bringing to us. But if he started with us, he will continue with us. And from that day we purposed, we changed our fellowship from their office on Monday, and we put it in the orphanage, and we started praying like George, and we started telling the Lord, we shall know that you called us when you provide for us. And we have such many miraculous testimonies that we have that the Lord has really done for us. We started our fellowship there. We started a Bible study on Saturdays, every Saturday morning, because most of Kenyan schools, they go up to 5 o'clock. So we had our Bible study on Saturdays for the children. And this time, because our home was very unique, it was very homely, we didn't have like timetables for children. We defied the government order of giving children uniform. So we became very conspicuous, and we had all these fights with them, conflicts with the government. But I thank God because finally we won. And over time, we had friends who were in the government, and we were able to repeal some through petitions. Jesse had a cousin who became a member of parliament, and thankfully, after President Moy left, we got a very nice old president who was listening to the many complaints that the society had. And one of them was about children. So there was this lady who was made a cabinet minister for children affairs, gender and children affairs. So we had gathered together a lot of people who were doing children projects. So, and the act was able to be changed in 2005 to accommodate more adoption societies so that we could place these children for adoption. So in 2005, the government allowed 5 more registered societies, and we were in a wider group. We had formed an association, that a Christian association called Little Angels Christian Association for Children in Need. So when the room was opened, a few ladies decided to put up to register an adoption society, and we called it Little Angels Adoption Society. You can Google that. And I became a representative of children's homes. I became a member, a committee member in the adoption society. And that's how we started now, giving out the children for adoption. We have a Kenyan Christian channel called Family TV. So we used to have, once a month, we would go there and talk about adoption, legal adoption. Because before that, we only had one adoption society which was affiliated with the government. And they really didn't used to do formal adoption. We were just selling children under the table. So we had children who would have been adopted, like 7 of them, but we didn't want to go through that adoption society because it was, of course, all about money changing. So when Little Angels was established, we started now, me being a committee member. It's called National Adoption Committee member. We were able now, and then there was more room open now. Many people now started registering children homes. So we were all, especially those that are Christian founded, we all became members of Little Angels Adoption Society. We would go to churches like I am standing here after the service. We would talk about adoption. And so adoption became, people became aware that you can still adopt even if you don't have a child. And so I used to sit in the adoption committee to verify the people who are coming in for adoption. And through that, out of the many children that we have rescued, abandoned babies, we've been able to place 93 children up to June this year. We've been able to place 93 children to our oldest adopted child is 14. He's 14 now. Yeah. We did 3 international adoptions, 2 in Germany and one in Sweden. Yeah. No, one in Finland. One in Finland and 2 in Germany. And the German couple is still in touch and a wonderful friend of the home. So that's basically how we started. When we started in that small house, we prayed for many things, and the children kept on coming. Our home was not opened to any person other than from our church members until Pastor Blake came to Kenya in November with his two grandchildren, Matthew and Frank, and they came basically for evangelism. I live near the church, so it was just like a 5 minutes walk. And when I was in church and Pastor Blake came, I used to imagine they are just going back home and they are strangers in the country, and that time the country was not too safe. So one day I invited them to our home for dinner, and we had such a great bond. We became such dear friends. I remember I think the second or the third time Pastor Blake came, my husband, we had an old Mercedes that was left hand, and he challenged David's dad that, can you drive this? And said, oh yeah, I can drive. And then he took the key and he entered, and the next thing he was driving outside, and we were all scared. And amazingly, everybody gets amazed because he was able to drive cars in Kenya. We have very loud public transport called matatus, so, and he could drive all the way to Open Hand. So we started visiting, and his family, Blake's family, the children, David, Brenda, they became part of a support for Open Hand. Everybody had a child, and that time I think we could care for a child for about $25 to $30 a month. So that's how we connected with David and the sisters and brothers and Frank and Matthew and Alex and all the others. And over time we became very close together. He used to go for evangelism in very marginalized areas. He's the one who actually took the challenge. How far can I go for Christ? He had just lost his wife, and he used to tell me, Alice, I feel like a one-legged man. I can't operate, so I can't go on being a pastor. So that's how God spoke to me to travel all the way to Kenya. And he went to the Maasais, and he established 4 churches there, and a theological school there. Wonderful, and nobody knows about it, but we know. And so when he used to come, he used to challenge us. Alice, what are you doing with this place? This place is too small for the children. So, and there's nothing much I can do. I don't have money to buy for you land. So with time, we had gotten very good Kenyan friends, and one day I was challenged. One of them challenged me and asked me, Alice, why can't you just, you don't have to do a harambe, Steve knows about harambe. They are very abused in Kenya, so I told them I don't want to do a harambe for the Lord's work, and I'll pray. And she went and gathered some 10 women who had good jobs, and they all decided that each one of them should have a dinner, and each one of them comes with a gift, and the other ladies, whatever gift you have. And the first dinner fundraiser we did was in 2018 November 30th. And miraculously we raised over 2 million shillings, 2 million shillings. That's about $200,000. It was so unbelievable. This time our husbands had they had started coming in, and they would meet, like my friend's husband, he used to play golf, so he used to go and post, so my wife is in this, but they never did much. Rich people don't do much, especially if they don't know the Lord. So, but we had very, very humble women come for that dinner, and it was such a miracle. It's unbelievable. Nobody could believe it. My husband could not believe it. Nobody could believe it. Yeah, and we just started now looking for land, and that's the time we bought a place that we have a video. We bought land there, and it was all about what George Miller said. We have testimonies. The children have testimonies. So we bought the land, and I don't like talking about dreams, but I know one day I woke up at night and I told the Lord, please Lord, we want to do a house. We have a board. And then the ladies we used to have fellowship with, 2 of them are board members. And we also, I became a believer through the Anglican Church. We had a chaplain who used to come for the Bible studies, so he's a board member. And so they wanted us to do a tin house, like iron sheet house. And I said, no, the Lord showed me a beautiful house. And that night I remember I woke up and I took a ruler and drew it up. And I asked the Lord, if really you confirm to your people what you do. And I think 3 weeks after, I dreamt again, the same thing. I saw the house, and I woke up, I picked that draft, and I saw it, and I saw the same dream. And I went and shared with my partner, and he said, Alice, I think we just need to look for an architect. I said, just we don't have money for an architect. They are very expensive in Kenya. So now we started thinking, of course, when we had a very big lift conflict because of, we could have done an iron sheet house, which would have costed maybe like $2,000, but I had this vision, and I told them, these are God's children, and we've come very far. The Lord was with us when we got the money for the land, and I believe we can get money for the building. So we all started praying. Of course, after much struggle, we started praying and praying. And I remember the couple that had adopted a child from us, they had left Kenya in October of 2008. So 2009, the daughter now had started, there is a Catholic couple but very stout, and she had started going for, when was Tsunami? Tsunami was in 2004. No, not 2004, I think 2009, yeah, the tsunami. And a parent from that school had seen a story in Kenya from this couple, and one of their little children was going to school with this girl, and he came to school and asked about the couple and asked them about Kenya. And that's how now we did some beads, some artwork in the home, and we sent to them, and they did a table like that, and amazingly, whatever we had, and I also sent them some bagels like this, Kenyan bagels. So we did quite a bit of things, and we sent to them. Some of them had been done by the children. And they sold them for two Sundays, and we were able to raise 1.5 million in Kenya. It's quite a lot of money, and we also did our dinner that year, and we had enough to put up the home that you saw. So we moved into the home, to the new home now, on the 22nd of December 2011. And of course, we started farming. Steve knows that the Kikuyus are farmers, and they're very hardworking with the hands and very entrepreneurial. So we started doing things, going there, having the land plowed. It's a very dry area. We get rainfall maybe once a month, so we needed water. And there is a lot of history to learn from open hand. I can stay up like a whole day talking about how God has weaved things together through His people. So we started now farming little things for the home. The children had started growing bigger, the ones who were not adopted. The government was still pushing children to our home. One, because they knew that when we abandon, we rescue children, you automatically give them over for adoption. I think we are the second highest from New Life to have children placed in adoption in Kenya, yeah. So that's how we all started, and everything has its history. The land has history, the house has history, the fence has history, the borehole has history. That was the greatest breakthrough we could ever have in that land, the borehole, because it was a game changer. We could grow our vegetables all year round, yeah. And even now, Pastor Blake had introduced us to read oil. When we did the borehole, he was able to, we were using a lot of electricity to pump the water, so he put a solar system such that we use solar, we no longer have electricity bills, and thus far we have come, and we have seen the hand of the Lord in many areas.
Can we give it up? Can we give it up to the Lord?